Okay, well, hello everyone. A big thank you to Guarantee BBVA and CDP for the invitation to speak. Let me try to give well, first some comments on the terrible year we have all been living, the COVID, and its hope for soon recovery in terms of health outcomes, in terms of the economy. When we think about sustainability, in terms of the performance of the global community on sustainability terms, well, we can look at the environmental, social, and governance outcomes from the past year, and based on different measures, we can see, I think, some promising signs in the ability of the private sector and the financial sector to respond to these difficult situations. We have seen quite a large increase actually in investment going into sustainability-linked funds, I think based on their underlying performance and the estimation that the factors they seek out through their investment strategies actually align well with certain societal objectives, including those in addressing pandemics. On environmental measures, as we all know, there has been a reduction in global carbon emissions, about 10%. Unfortunately, that has bounced back now as economies have restarted. Interestingly, what we need to do to get onto a 1.5 degree trajectory really is see this type of 10% reduction per year that we saw this past year. Of course, we hope we can do it without destroying the economy or shutting down the economy as we've had to do in addressing the pandemic. The social issue in ESG is probably the one where we saw the biggest impacts in the past year, particularly in emerging markets, in informal sectors where 65% of the population works, 80% in India. And as we know, the digital divide has meant that those particularly have been so severely impacted, loss of income, and also elevated health impacts. And therefore, we see the shift of society towards one that is more capable also cannot be leaving large parts behind. In terms of the ESG, the governance, this really has been a stress test of economies, of companies, and the ability to ride out stresses, economic, social, health-wise. And I think it has really, we've seen that companies with higher ESG ratings actually have been able to perform better. In terms of the COVID recovery, we have more than $20 trillion US have been committed to economic stimulus, and it's actually worked so far reasonably well in keeping the economy, keeping the lights on, as we could say. However, as Fatih Birol from the International Energy Agency has pointed out, if that 20 trillion is not invested in the right ways, we might be building ourselves out of one crisis and digging ourselves deeper on the next. And we talk about 10 years to get onto a low carbon trajectory. And as Fatih points out, it's actually 2 or 3 years, because how we invest those monies, if we invest it in long life infrastructure that is high carbon in nature, we will be locking ourselves into a 3 to 4 or above degree trajectory. So what does this mean for corporates and for the private sector in terms of how you should be looking to address the sustainability challenges? We like to talk about the risk lens, the opportunity lens, and increasingly we're also talking about alignment with society's challenges like global climate change. Let me go into a little bit more detail there. We in the UNEP Finance Initiative, we are a partnership between the UN and the financial sector. Been around for a long time. We've established some of the most important frameworks for the financial sector to align with society's challenges. We launched the Principles for Responsible Investment in 2007, Principles of Sustainable Insurance in 2012. We also work with partners on the establishment of the Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative. We're pleased to have Borsa Istanbul as a valued member. These frameworks traditionally have focused largely on the environmental and social risk lens. So in terms of putting in place the types of risk management systems you need to not be getting into the wrong sorts of activities that are going to create social and environmental harm. However, in 2015, when 195 governments came together to agree on the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, we shifted towards an age of the role of the private sector and the financial sector, and also investing in opportunity in addressing these challenges. We've seen a great growth in this period in green bond issuance, in investment in renewable energies, and many other types of clean infrastructure, new business models. So it's all been very promising. I think the challenges with this period of experimentation has been that these business opportunities have still been largely treated as sidecar activities, nice to haves, but alongside business as usual activities. And that's really the crux of the problem, because as we see, for instance, on climate change, the emissions are not going down in aggregate, and therefore we need to do more than nice to have. We also have Mark Carney, from the former governor of the Bank of England, who, with his important speech on the tragedy of Horizon, and pointing out that discount rates within the private sector do not align with discount rates for society. And so the Paris Agreement talks about climate stabilization by end of century, and in the private sector, end of century is out of scope typically. So why focus there? So these are some big problems, challenges we've had. But now, since 2015, there's been progress, and particularly starting in 2019, where we really started to seriously shift the lens towards the notion of alignment. We had there 130 banks that we were pleased to work with, who drafted a set of UN principles for responsible banking. And we're very pleased today to have Guarantee BBVA, to have İşbank, Bank, and TKSB as the 4 Turkish signatories. Today, we have a little over 40% of global banking assets have signed up to this framework. And this framework is not so much a risk framework, it's one about alignment. It's about understanding the contributions of a bank's activities to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, to addressing climate change. So it really is the one about what is our business, what do we do, what is our purpose, and are we actually helping drive sustainable development? Also in 2019, we had a group of investors who issued the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, and with the UN Secretary General and other actors, we, for the first time, really put on the agenda the notion that we need to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, by mid-century. The group that I mentioned started with 2 trillion in assets. Today has grown to 5.5 trillion in assets. And what they very ambitiously have pointed out is not so much about the targets you set in 2050, it's what you're doing today and the interim targets that you set. So this group has issued a target setting protocol for 2025, and some of their members, or all of them, will issue their 2025 targets before the Glasgow COP. For instance, Allianz Group has a group of more than 2 trillion euro in assets, has set a reduction target of 25% across the portfolio by 2025. So very significant actions, and we would say this is what alignment is about. The public side was a little bit slow through a number of years, but in 2020, so in September of this year, we have President Xi from China, who announced China's target of net zero emissions by 2060, followed very quickly by Japan, Korea, and many other countries. We're just now waiting. The new Biden administration in the US will also shortly release their target. So now we have both the private sector setting targets and the public sector. This is about alignment. This is about working forward. This is about the race to zero. So what does this mean for corporates looking forward? I think looking forward is really central to this, because your businesses are now expected to not only understand the types of risks that you need to be cautious towards, environmental, social, climate-wise, but you also start to need to be predictive in the sectors that you operate in, the customers you deal with, the value chains, supply chains that you have, because climate, what has happened in the past is not the same as what's going to happen in the future. So we need to get a better understanding of where the risks lie, and to do forward risk modeling, scenario analysis, to understand how different industries are going to change. And I think you will all agree, the only constant today is change. Every industry is being disrupted, from infrastructure, buildings and construction, to steel and cement, energy and transport, even agriculture, food systems. All of these are being turned around The climate prerogative and other sustainability issues are often at the core of that. So is digitization. And it's very important to be better at predicting essentially how these changes are going to affect on our businesses. Being able to align with the Sustainable Development Goals provides you a compass to try to understand how the world, what the needs are, what the expectations from governments and society are going to be able to provide better understanding and to start yourself providing guidance to the markets, to your customers on what you expect of your partners. I think combining all of the above, the central factor is how you work with your clients. It's not about dropping your clients overnight. It's about working with them and helping them navigate the transitions that are afoot. We are still in low interest rate environments that expect it to continue for some time. This is the right time to invest in this transition. This is the right time to align with society's needs. Through the UNEP finance initiatives and the UN as a whole, through our principles for responsible banking and the other frameworks that I've mentioned, we're there to work with the private sector to develop common methodologies for alignment on climate, on nature loss, gender equality, access to finance, and more. Together, we can find the capacities to deliver. Together, we can help solve society's biggest challenges. My pleasure to be with you today, and best wishes for a successful meeting.